In the middle of a bone-chilling snowstorm, a royal carriage stumbled along the frozen road. The wind howled, snow flew everywhere, and the air itself seemed determined to freeze the soul of anyone foolish enough to step outside. Inside the carriage sat a blonde beauty wrapped tightly in a thick coat. She was Canola F. Incana Charlemagne, Princess of Charlemagne. Her name already too long, not to mention the list of her life's problems. With her was an old man named Oscar. Maybe an aide, maybe an advisor, or maybe just her personal grumbler. His voice never stopped spinning in circles, laced with the pessimism of a man who's seen way too many bitter winters. According to him, this whole journey was a waste of energy. A marriage proposal for Princess Canola? Please. Everyone knew. Even if the world ended tomorrow, she'd never sit on the throne. Harsh words, sure, but behind them was a mix of worry. Or maybe just the complaints of a man whose knees hated -degree weather. So who exactly was he worrying about more? The princess or himself? On the other bench sat Angelina, an old lady with the spark of an oil lamp, always ready to flare up. She wasted no time blaming Oscar, pointing fingers like it was her job. Strangely, their bickering gave Canola a bit of free entertainment. At least she got a comedy show in the middle of a blizzard. Even though her lips were turning blue, she still had the brain space to think. A month ago, life was way more peaceful. Sketching, lounging around, believing that was enough to be happy. But everything flipped upside down when a letter arrived. Not a love letter. Nope. A command from her brother. Canola had to marry the crown prince of Tripoli. No picture, no options, no discussion. Just a political deal that screamed one thing. Her opinion didn't count. The trip dragged on. Angelina dug into Canola's love life, mentioning Hethion, that handsome guy who turned out to be a little unstable. Canola had been too quick to judge based on looks, falling for the pretty face that hid a shaky mind. Angelina even joked that just because someone's name sounded normal didn't mean their brain was. Exhibit A, Oscar. The mood only got tenser. If Oscar could call Angelina a sweet old witch, you could imagine how noisy that carriage ride got. Canola had already decided to dump Hethion anyway. He was just studying abroad here. And when he heard about this arranged marriage, instead of fighting for her, he used it as the perfect excuse to bow out. Was that selfishness or just cowardice? Who knows? All that mattered was Hethion had no guts to go against Canola's brother. Then disaster struck. The golden carriage, a farewell gift from her sister, broke down. One of the wheels shattered on the rough road. Canola thought about abandoning it, but Angelina flat out refused. No way were they showing up empty-handed. And when they checked, turns out the carriage wasn't just plated with gold. It was solid gold. Yeah, no sane person was leaving a walking treasure chest behind. Just as Canola was about to return to the carriage, riders appeared out of the storm. Ludek, another aide, quickly told her to get back inside. Her head spun with panic. Were they mountain bandits? Secret assassins sent to erase her? Or just opportunists who smelled gold from miles away? Angelina, ever sarcastic, muttered that if anyone still had the decency to greet strangers in this weather, maybe they weren't all bad. Soon, a man on a black horse rode forward. His skin was pale as snow, his hair whipped like the storm itself, and his green eyes gleamed like emeralds. The scene felt ripped straight out of a romance novel. Canola froze, utterly captivated, all of Angelina's warnings flying straight out the window. She almost believed she was looking at her fated groom. Angelina and Oscar, watching the princess stand there like she'd just been hit by Cupid's arrow, fell silent. Should they pity her, shake their heads, or just enjoy the free drama of a snowstorm love story kicking off right in front of them? Princess Canola was the definition of a hopeless romantic. One glance at the handsome white-haired man and her heart had already done 3 backflips. From that first moment, she couldn't wait to talk to her supposed fiancé, as if her whole life had been leading up to this scene. Angelina, who had seen enough drama to fill 10 romance novels, tried to reel Canola back in. Maybe don't get carried away just yet. One meeting doesn't mean destiny. But Canola was stubborn. Hadn't the prince already offered them a warm carriage, even going out of his way to clear out their trash? AKA, the broken golden carriage. Not to mention he rode through a blizzard just to greet them. If that wasn't proof of devotion, what was? She waited with a racing heart while the prince busied himself with repairs. The only words she got? A calm suggestion to go back inside because it was too cold out. Sure, that quiet, reserved charm was cute. But to Canola, it also screamed, maybe he's not even curious about me at all. The conversation slipped back into the past. Angelina reminded her of Lord Hethion. Yes, the same instant love story from before. First sight, swoon, full-blown drama. But in the end, the only decent thing about Hethion had been his face. Canola refused the comparison. This time was different. This wasn't some fling. This was her official future husband. Falling head over heels was perfectly reasonable. Angelina gave up. Every warning she voiced, Canola spun into a positive sign. The real question, why was Canola already head over heels while the so-called fiancé hadn't said a single word about feelings? Desperate for backup, Canola turned to Oscar. Surely her beauty was enough to make anyone fall in love at first sight? Without missing a beat, Oscar declared she was the most beautiful woman in the world, breathtaking in every way. Though unfortunately, only breathtaking to him and Angelina. Suddenly, knock, knock. The window shook. There he was, the white-haired prince himself. Canola nearly exploded with excitement, even insisting he come inside to talk. Pushy? Maybe. But that was Canola. The prince, however, politely declined. Rules were rules. All visitors to Tripol had to greet the king first. That meant neither he nor his knights could officially address her yet. In truth, they'd only come because they knew the Charlemagne carriage could never survive these winter mountains. Between the brutal cold and wild beasts, the trip was suicide without an escort. A knight called him Husa. Canola jumped at it. Was that his name? Nope. Just a title. As he prepared to leave, Canola tried one last angle. If these mountains were so dangerous, why risk himself instead of just sending knights? Calmly, the prince took her hand and said, "A man who can't protect his partner doesn't deserve to be called a warrior of Tripol." Her heart somersaulted again. She immediately looked at Oscar and Angelina like, "See? See? You heard that too, right?" For her, the evidence was undeniable. He was falling for her too. Oscar and Angelina exchanged a look. Déjà vu. Once again, Canola was writing her own script through very creative lenses. The journey pressed on. Canola replayed his words in her head. The road to becoming man and wife is still long. What did that mean exactly? Before she could overanalyze, Ludek knocked to announce they'd arrived in Tripol. Canola braced herself for flower petals, fanfare, maybe a dramatic welcome. Instead, dead silence. The cold air itself felt hostile. She immediately wondered if she'd already made a mistake. Oscar muttered that her reputation must have gotten here first. Apparently, she was known as a man-eater. Rude, but who could stop Oscar's mouth? Ludek urged them down. The prince led them straight toward the palace. Tripol was massive. Towering buildings, impossibly high ceilings, endless halls that made Charlemagne look tiny. Finally, they entered the main chamber. Waiting there was the king of Tripol himself, his presence sharp as a blade. His gaze cut like ice, his aura pressing down on everyone. Canola froze in shock, because this terrifying man was none other than her future father-in-law. The first meeting with the king of Tripol was supposed to be grand, epic, memorable. Instead, it was short, cold, and about as thrilling as stale bread. The king only counted how many people were in the party, clearly fewer than expected, either because no one dared join, or Tripol's reputation scared them off. Then, that was it. Canola couldn't accept that. No way. Was that really all? With her trademark habit of following every intrusive thought, she boldly stepped forward and introduced herself with her full royal name, long enough to fill an entire family tree. Canola F. Incana Charlemagne, the fourth princess of Charlemagne. To her, it was basic manners. Not introducing herself would just embarrass her kingdom. The Tripol knights actually held their breath, waiting for the king's reaction. The prince looked shocked, probably because Canola's bluntness was way too much by Tripol standards. To them, her courage sounded more like ignorance. Silence finally cracked. Before the prince could redirect, the king answered himself. He called himself Gragford, descendant of Tedrago. Getting a direct reply from the king should have been an honor. But Canola? She straight up asked if she could just call him father, since she'd be the daughter-in-law anyway. Absolutely unhinged. Of course he refused. His reason? She hadn't even set foot in the garden of Tedrago. The nights went stiff, but Canola just found it rude. She'd traveled all this way. Didn't she at least deserve better treatment? Self-centered? Maybe. But that was Canola. Inside, she fumed. How dare they decide her marriage without her voice? But on the other hand, there was no way she was leaving Charlemagne without at least one proper date with her gorgeous future husband. When it came to love, Canola was aggressive to the core. As if that wasn't enough, she piled on another request. Not only should she be treated as the princess of Charlemagne, she demanded to be honored as a guest of Tripol, too. Before her list of demands grew longer, a knight quickly cut in, asking permission to escort her to her quarters. The king ordered the prince to stay behind. Once in her room, Canola was told to wait for her personal attendant. Angelina immediately spoke up, practically glowing with admiration. Watching Canola speak up to the king of Tripol? That lit a fire in her. Oscar and Ludek chimed in too. In their eyes, Canola hadn't been wrong at all. Someone had to remind the king that even he couldn't treat foreign princesses like props, no matter how powerful he was. Canola, though pale, panicked. Had she ruined her first impression? Had she just gotten herself separated from her Prince Charming because of her bold mouth? Angelina saw it differently. If the prince was a real man, he should be captivated by Canola's courage. Looking for validation, Canola asked, "Did I look cool back there?" Of course, Oscar and Angelina said yes. Angelina even added she'd never seen Canola look that amazing before. Canola's confidence instantly shot back up. She proudly declared her bravery part of her irresistible charm. That high didn't last long. She finally took a good look at the room. Small, rustic, dull colors, dreary bedding, no decorations, not even space for her servants. Panic hit her. How was she supposed to explain to her loyal attendants that there wasn't a place for them to rest? A knock at the door cut through her thoughts. A woman entered, introducing herself as the personal servant assigned to the Princess of Charlemagne. Canola froze. She'd never imagined a servant this stunning. Tall, elegant, long black hair, and eyes glowing violet like polished amethyst. It looked like a brand new drama was about to begin. Canola almost forgot how to blink when her personal maid walked in. Tall, graceful, long flowing black hair, and violet eyes sparkling like amethyst gems. For a second, Canola wondered if Tripol had an unspoken law. You were either drop-dead gorgeous or terrifyingly fierce. No average category allowed. With her overactive imagination, Canola instantly nicknamed the maid Tibuchina. Tibuchina's sweet smile lit up the gloomy, rustic room like 1,000 candles. She offered to show Canola around the palace, until the prince appeared. His cold yet magnetic aura sucked all the oxygen out of the room in one swoop. The prince, the very man Canola's eyes had been glued to all this time, casually took over the tour himself. Tibuchina bowed and left. Canola blinked. Wait, so her maid wasn't required to be glued to her side? Weird rule. And so the palace tour began. Canola, who could never keep her curiosity in check, immediately obsessed over what she should call the man walking beside her. The prince explained the title, Husa, the name given to heirs of Tripol's throne. Canola listened seriously, then rejected it completely. Too formal. She wanted something more personal. After all, wasn't she going to be by his side from now on? Clingy level, maxed out. The prince looked stunned. His expression screamed, "Nobody's ever dared say that before." In Tripol, formality ruled all, but Canola barged right through it like she was picking out a nickname for her pet cat. And yet, behind his surprise, the prince gave her something real. His true name, Edel. In his eyes, Canola caught a flicker of loneliness. For a second, guilt pricked her chest. Maybe she'd pushed too far. But at the same time, jackpot. She got to call him by his name. Canola made a whole show of it. She stood tall and introduced herself with her full mountain of a name, topping it off by declaring herself his fiancée. Edel's reply was simple. He was merely a descendant of Tedrago. They shook hands. Canola clamped down on the handshake like superglue. Edel looked stiff, clearly not used to being grabbed that hard, but he didn't pull away. When talk shifted to the engagement letter, Canola admitted she'd suspected it was a fake. With how icy everyone in Tripol acted, it felt more like a war declaration than a wedding invite. Edel confirmed the letter was real, straight from the crown, but he offered no comfort, nothing to ease her nerves. His quiet pessimism made Canola's head spin even more. Meanwhile, Canola fiddled with the letter, trying to fold it neatly with one hand, because the other hand still had Edel trapped. Edel dryly suggested she finish folding first, then go back to holding his hand. Canola panicked. What if he ran off the second she let go? Edel deadpanned back. Why would he even run? Okay, maybe she was being a little much, but it wasn't her fault. Edel had held her hand first during their intro, and that tiny spark had flipped a switch inside her. Still, she knew one truth. She was the one who fell first, so of course she'd have to work harder. If Edel wasn't ready to return her feelings yet, then fine. She'd just put in the effort until he did. She even added that she wouldn't force him. If he didn't want her, she'd step back. Edel only reminded her that they'd known each other for literally one day and were already officially engaged. Maybe slow down a little? But slow down didn't exist in Canola's vocabulary. Instead, she doubled down. With full dramatic flair, she squeezed Edel's hand tight, bowed her head, and pressed a kiss to it like sealing a vow. Inside, her mind was already set. She was in love at first sight. She knew Edel wasn't there yet, but she'd fight with all her heart until he was. Blunt, clingy, and ridiculously over the top. That was Canola. And somehow that was exactly her charm. Days passed, but Canola's brain was stuck on one thing, her grand love confession to Edel. She'd poured her whole heart out, complete with dramatic hand-holding, and his reply had been a simple, "I see." That was it. Period. End of story. And honestly, it fit him perfectly. Cool, reserved, carved from marble handsome. Which meant Canola couldn't even be mad. Still, if Edel hadn't been that ridiculously good-looking, she probably would have given up 2 days ago and drowned her sorrows in cake. Angelina tried offering perspective. Compared to the suspicious glares of the Tripol court, like the Charlemagne delegation had come only to borrow money and skip town. I see was practically romantic. Canola picked up the engagement letter again. Plain, stiff, official, definitely legit. So not a fake. But why did Tripol seem to hate Charlemagne's guts? To make matters worse, Edel had left for a hunting trip the day after she arrived, only returning 3 days later. Talk about bad timing. Fall in love, then get ghosted. A soft knock pulled her from her sulk. Tibucina entered, her beauty glowing in the candlelight. She asked if Canola was all right. She'd been locked in her room for days, and Tibucina feared she might be ill. Logically, this should have made Canola happy. But pride got in the way. Instead of blushing with gratitude, she snapped back, asking why Tibucina had only shown up now. Wasn't she supposed to be helping her settle in? Tibucina's answer surprised her. Edel didn't really like Tibucina visiting too often. That's why she held back. But since Canola welcomed her, she was glad. And just like that, Canola realized, oh, Tibucina wasn't actually her maid. Confusion deepened. How did Tripol's social system even work? Tibucina explained. She wasn't a servant assigned to wait on Canola, but someone meant to help her adapt. She wasn't a noble either. In Tripol, nobles were called radins, kin of the king, diras. The warriors who served the diras and radins were grassas. Tibucina herself worked for the temple. Angelina watched Canola's face twist with confusion. Even she had to admit the whole Tripol system was baffling. She'd have to start learning too, just to keep up. Tibucina reassured them both. Canola would get used to it, and she'd personally teach her every day. "So you don't get lost," she said with a smile. Canola jumped at the idea. Forget lessons today. What she really needed was healing, like a walk around the palace. If she stayed locked up any longer, she'd start growing mushrooms. Tibucina agreed, smiling softly. Meanwhile, far away, Edel's hunting party finally returned. This year's hunt had taken longer. The quota was double last year's, but they succeeded. As they celebrated, they remembered darker times when a plague nearly wiped them out. If not for Edel, Husa, discovering the treatment, they might not have survived. The mood turned playful when one warrior teased Edel. Surely he was eager to get home because his fiancée, Canola, had already confessed her love. Edel's reply was colder than Tripol's snow. That means nothing. The warriors froze in shock. Thank heavens Canola wasn't there. Her heart would have shattered like thin ice. Then Edel added that he knew the temple had sent Tibucina to accompany Canola, and competent in this case meant skilled enough to make Canola leave Tripol sooner. The mystery deepened, but behind his frosty mask, Edel couldn't lie to himself. From the start, Canola had dazzled him, her golden curls, her smile bright as spring sunlight. Yet her eyes carried the same icy winter as his homeland. He knew her confidence was born of ignorance, and that was exactly what made him unable to look away. Still, to him, none of it mattered. The temple had already decided. Diraz would not defy their will. The arranged marriage would eventually be canceled. And so Edel sealed his feelings shut, as though they'd never existed. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Tibucina could hardly believe it when she found out Canola had come to Tripol without knowing so much as her fiancé's face or name. To her, it sounded like a forced tragedy. One person carrying the burden, while the other might not even realize there was a burden. Canola, in her innocence, thought that's just how royal marriages always worked. Tibucina nearly smacked her own forehead. How could anyone accept fate so easily? In her view, living a life you never chose only led to one thing: bitterness. But Canola thought differently. To her, life was already full of blessings. Why waste energy on resentment? She was so positive that if there were a contest for ambassador of staying happy in miserable situations, Canola would have won gold on the spot. As they walked through the palace together, one thing stuck out. Everything looked gloomy. Bare stone walls, no royal portraits, no fancy decor, not even a decent selfie corner. Only the reception hall had a bit of carved detail. The rest? Uniform, cold, painfully practical. Tibucina explained that the bleak look was intentional. Tripol valued function over beauty. In her eyes, it was far more humble than Charlemagne. Ironically, it was this very plainness that made Canola feel Tripol had its own odd kind of charm. Then they reached a spot so gray that Canola thought it was a cemetery. Nope, just the palace's back garden, long abandoned. Tibucina told its story calmly. The gardener had given up, beaten by the frozen, stubborn soil that refused warmth. Canola realized she hadn't seen a single tree, let alone flowers, since her arrival. Cold air was one thing, but did the land itself have to be this heartless? Out of nowhere, Tibucina turned to her and spoke bluntly. Canola was too beautiful and too warm-hearted for a place like Tripol. She should go somewhere worthy of her, where love would welcome her. Tripol was full of cold, closed-off people who hated outsiders. If she wanted, that alone could be her ticket to cancel the engagement. Canola was stunned, but instead of crumbling, she corrected Tibucina. Sure, she wouldn't deny she was beautiful. Facts are facts. But Tibucina had misunderstood. She wasn't naturally warm-hearted. Her friendliness and charm were a deliberate effort, not some divine gift. And while, yes, she was disappointed by Tripol's chilly welcome, she wasn't shocked. If coldness toward foreigners was the norm here, then she would just work harder to understand it. Tibucina admitted she liked Canola, and that's exactly why she didn't want to see the girl's light dim. Canola only smiled softly, insisting people don't change that easily. She might live this way until the end of her life. She thanked Tibucina for her concern, but refused to give up. Tibucina clenched her fist, as if silently swearing, "Just wait and see." She was convinced Canola would suffer under the weight of this icy nation. But Canola fired back with energy. She couldn't quit, because she'd already fallen for Edel at first sight. She even had a whole speech prepared about how she was going to make Edel fall in love with her too. To her, true love only grew stronger when tested. The reply left Tibucina gaping. How could anyone be this optimistic? Canola's bright smile, paired with her light-hearted words, felt like a gentle slap against every warning Tibucina had given. The longer she looked at her, the clearer it was. This girl was dazzling, and completely out of place in Tripol. When Tibucina called her Princess Canola, something in the tone felt heavy. The truth followed. Tripol's heir wasn't just a ruler, but also the nation's strongest warrior. Naturally, their partner had to meet the same standard. Strong body, wise mind, pure heart. And according to the temple, a foreigner could almost never meet those criteria. Break that rule, and the gods would punish Tripol, stripping away their blessings. Only then did Tibucina reveal her true self, the high priestess of the temple, servant of the god of all things, bearer of Tripol's prayers. Her duty now was to judge Canola's worth, to decide if the marriage with Edel could be blessed or not. With solemn eyes, she asked Canola to prove herself worthy to step into Tedrago's sacred garden.